They said he took a man's breath. But the only breath Chijioke fought for that night was his mother's. Welcome to Priska Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us where you are watching, and grab your popcorn as we dive into the story. The night in Yumyadike was quiet, the kind of quiet that carried secrets. The moon rose pale above the raffia palms, painting the red earth in silver. A generator hummed faintly in the distance, then coughed and died, leaving behind the sounds of crickets and the barking of a restless dog. Inside a small mud-walled hut, a young man stirred awake. Chijioke, 23 years old, sat up on his raffia mat. His shirt clung to his chest with sweat, and his heart thumped as though it had been warned of trouble before his ears could hear it. He reached for the kerosene lamp, struck a match, and the flame flickered to life, pushing shadows into the corners. "Ma," he whispered, "are you breathing well?" On the other side of the room, his mother coughed weakly. Mama Aloku, frail but fierce, pulled herself half upright on the mat. "I am fine, my son. Just fetch hot water for me." He nodded, poured water into a small pot, and set it over the glowing charcoal stove. As steam began to rise, a sound split the night. A scream. It came from the direction of Matsi Okafor's compound, sharp, high, and short, like the cry of a goat at slaughter. Then silence. Chijioke froze. His mother's eyes widened. "What was that?" she asked. He shook his head, straining his ears. From Matsi's side, but it has stopped. "Don't go there," she warned. Her voice trembled but held firm. "Leave other people's trouble to themselves." Chijioke nodded, though his curiosity burned. He lifted the steaming towel and placed it near her chest, watching the vapor curl upward. "Breathe it in slowly, Mama," he said softly. Outside, hurried footsteps pounded the dusty paths. Neighbors were waking. Voices rose in alarm, and the barking of dogs spread like gossip in the dark. Then came the knock. Not a neighbor's gentle tap. It was heavy, urgent, the knock of men who carried authority. "Open in the name of the elders," a voice boomed. Mama Aloka's frail hand clutched her son's arm. "Don't open. My spirit is not at peace." But in a village, there are knocks a young man cannot ignore. Respect was as binding as rope. Chijioke stood, wiped his palms on his trousers, and slid the wooden bolt aside. The door swung open. Lantern light blinded him for a moment. 3 village youths stood outside, faces stern, red cloth tied across their foreheads. Behind them, a crowd pressed forward, men in wrappers, women clutching shawls, children peeking from behind legs. "Chijioke, the tallest youth said, "you will follow us to the palace." "Why?" Chijioke asked, his voice firm though his heart raced. "Because Matsi Okafor is dead," the youth replied, "and you were the last seen near his house." Chijioke's mouth opened, then closed. His mind spun. "Dead? How?" "That is not true," Mama Aloku cried, pushing herself up from the mat. "He has been with me since night fell. He has not left this house." "Save your words for the elders," the youth snapped. "Move." They pulled Chijioke into the open. The crowd closed in, a living wall of suspicion. Whispers flew like bats. He took the old man's breath. "I knew it. Quiet boys are dangerous. Did you not see him praying alone by the palms?" Chijioke's fists clenched at his sides, but he said nothing. He remembered his mother's words. "Don't let the world harden your heart." The procession wound through the dusty path until they reached the Igui's palace. A lantern burned on the veranda, casting long shadows across the courtyard. At the center sat Ogweifi Nadi, the chief of security, a man as broad as a mortar with eyes sharp as spearheads. "Bring him forward," Ogweifi commanded. They shoved Chijioke into the square of light. "Where were you when Matsi Okafor died?" Ogweifi asked. "In my house," Chijioke replied steadily. "With my mother. She is ill." "Who saw you?" "My mother." A ripple of mocking laughter ran through the crowd. Someone hissed, "Convenient." Ogweifi raised a hand. Silence. He turned to a woman standing proudly at the front. "Neka," known for her sharp tongue. "Neka, what did you see?" She lifted her chin. "At dusk, I saw this boy near Matsi's fence. Later, I heard the cry. Now the man is dead. What else do we need?" Murmurs of agreement spread. Chijioke shook his head quickly. "I went to Ani Nkechi's shop to buy Gary. Her shop is beside the fence. Ask her, where is Nkechi?" Ogweifi barked. After a delay, Nkechi, the shopkeeper, was brought forward, a baby tied to her back. She looked tired but resolute. "Yes," she said. "Chijioke bought Gary from me that evening. He stood by the fence. I never saw him enter Matsu's compound." A brief silence followed. The crowd shifted uneasily. Still, Neka hissed, unwilling to let go. "Every evening he lingers there. Why? What is he looking for?" "For food," Chijioke said, his voice rising with anger. "That is what my family can afford." A ripple of uneasy laughter broke the tension for a moment. But Og Weifei remained stern. He drummed his fingers on his thigh. "The old man is dead. There must be answers. Until dawn, the boy will stay here under watch. The police will come in the morning." The crowd accepted the ruling. Some grumbled, others nodded. They tied Chijioke's wrists lightly with rope and sat him on a wooden bench near the veranda. 2 guards with bamboo spears stood watch. The crowd thinned as villagers drifted back to their huts. Women whispered as they walked. Children tugged at their mothers' wrappers, asking questions too heavy for their age. Kechi passed by and touched Chijioke's shoulder briefly. "Hold strong," she whispered. Then she was gone. From where he sat, Chijioke could see Matsu Okafor's compound in the distance, lit by lanterns. He saw shadows moving, heard wailing rising and falling like waves. The image of the elder's bare feet beneath a cloth burned into his mind. He lowered his head, whispering a prayer. "God, let truth speak. Do not let shame bury me alive." The night crawled. Owls called from the trees. The guards shifted in their seats. Chijioke stayed awake, counting the hours until dawn. When morning finally came, the rooster crowed, and light crept across the courtyard. A motorcycle roared into the palace compound. A policeman had arrived. He climbed down, yawning, notebook in hand. "Where is the suspect?" he asked. They pointed at Chijioke. The policeman glanced at him, then at the restless crowd gathering again. He scribbled in his book. "We will take him to the station. The doctor will examine the body. Nobody should touch anything in that hut." The crowd buzzed louder. Some cheered, others shook their heads. But the decision was made. They untied Chijioke, only to bind him again with thicker rope. He looked once toward the road that led to his home. He thought of his mother, alone and coughing. He swallowed hard and walked toward the waiting motorcycle, his fate tied not to evidence, but to rumor. For the first time, the weight of injustice pressed heavy on his shoulders. He realized this was not just a night's trouble. It was the beginning of a storm that would test every breath he had. The motorcycle coughed to a stop beside a low-cream building with a tilted signboard, "Nigerian Police Force, Umudike Post." The air smelled of dust, petrol, and paper that had seen too much sun. A few men sat on a bench under the veranda, watching like they were at a football match, and someone had finally brought the ball. "Down," the constable said. Chijioke stepped off. Rope cut into his wrists. He kept his eyes off the crowd. He had learned that faces could be heavier than chains. Inside, the front room was painted a tired blue. A portrait of the inspector general hung crooked, as if listening with one ear. Behind a scarred desk, the desk sergeant flipped open a ledger the size of a church Bible. Name: Chijioke Yuba. Age: 23. Occupation: farmer. The sergeant lifted his head, measuring him. An alleged offense. The constable answered before Chijioke could speak. Suspected in the death of elder Matsu Okafor. Pen scratched. Pages turned. A rubber stamp thudded like a drum. Every sound felt like it pushed him farther from his life. "Prince," the sergeant said. They pressed his fingers on an ink pad and rolled them on a form. A young officer stared too long at the dark whirls. "These lines," he muttered. "They always look guilty." Laughter rippled. The joke wasn't new, but it still stung. "Statement," the sergeant said. They sat him on a hard stool. A constable with a narrow face and neat handwriting asked the first question without looking up. "Where were you between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. last night?" "With my mother," he said. "She was coughing. I boiled water for steam." The pen paused. "Any witness?" "My mother." He swallowed. "And the church nurse, she visited us. She wrote the time." The constable glanced at the sergeant. A shoulder shrug answered. "We'll see. Did you enter the compound of the deceased?" "No." "Were you near his fence?" "Yes. I bought Gary from the shop beside it." The pen moved again, patient, suspicious. When the constable was done, he pushed the statement across the desk. "Sign." Chijioke read each line slowly. The constable grew impatient. "Sign, farmer." The sun is moving. He signed. Charge room, the sergeant said. We'll take witness statements. They walked him down a corridor where paint peeled like tired bark. A heavy door grated open. The cell was a square of cement with a barred window the size of a school slate. 2 men and 1 boy looked up. Faces that had learned to listen for doors more than for names. The constable untied his wrists. The rope left a red bracelet. Behave, the man said, and the door clanged shut. The cell smelled of damp clothes and old fear. A bucket crouched in a corner. Someone had carved God sees on the wall with something sharp. The older man was bare-chested, with ribs like a ladder. I am Madhu, he said, voice roughened by too much cheap gin and too many bad nights. They say I fought my wife. I say I fought the bottle. He laughed once, a sound without joy. The second man, small and restless, introduced himself as Kelechi. Accused of lifting a phone, he said. They have not found the phone, but they found me. The boy, no more than 17, hugged his knees. Osandu, he whispered. Conductor. They say I jumped fare with a customer's money. I didn't. The driver is my uncle. He will come. Uncles come slow to stations, Madhu said. Faster to weddings. Chijioke folded onto the floor. Heat pressed down like a hand. Through the tiny window came a rectangle of sky, thin, high, blue. He closed his eyes and pictured his mother's chest rising and falling. He counted her breaths in his mind until the count steadied his own. By noon, voices gathered at the front room like harmattan dust. Witnesses lined up, eager to pour their certainty into paper. Neka, the sergeant called. She swept in proudly, head tie high, perfume fighting the room. I saw him near the fence at dusk, she declared. Later, a scream. Now the elder is dead. Write it as I said it. Did you see him enter the compound? The constable asked. She blinked, annoyed at the shape of the question. Fence is not far from gate. Is gate not a kind of entering? The pen still moved. Next came Udo, who sold batteries and torches near the junction. That boy walks alone at night, he said, muttering. I don't know the words. He leaned in. My father told me. People who talk to themselves talk to spirits. Noted, the sergeant said, though his eyes were on the clock. Kechi came in with her baby sleeping on her back and a stubborn light in her face. He bought Gary from me, she said. He didn't step into the old man's compound. I would have seen it. Time? The constable asked. Almost sunset, she said. I was hurrying to close before the generator died. They asked for a signature. She signed in big, careful letters. As she turned to go, she faced the room. Write truth. It saves time later. The sergeant's smile flattened. The next name was called. In the corridor, sandals slapped. A voice rose, thin, urgent. Officer Baiko. Let me just see him. He is my son. The cellmates looked toward the door. Osanda stood, hopeful. The peephole opened. Who is your son? The constable asked. Chijioke Yuba. Old woman. The constable said, tired. You cannot see him yet. I brought food, she said. Let him eat. A pause. The bolt scraped. The constable took a small cooler through the gap and closed it again. Minutes later, the door opened. He set the cooler on the floor and left without a word. Madhu whistled softly. Mothers can move stones. Inside the cooler were beans and 2 wraps of EBA, still warm. Eat, Madhu said, sliding 1 wrap toward Osandu. Food is fellowship. They ate in silence, like men in church. Between mouthfuls, Chijioke whispered. She said the nurse came last night. She wrote the time. Kelechi looked up. A book that carries time can carry freedom. Or be lost, Madhu said. Paper gets tired, too. Rain began as a soft tapping on the roof, and then found its full voice, loud on zinc, loud enough to cover a man's thoughts. Water pushed a small brown river along the corridor. Damp climbed the walls like a thief. The constable with neat handwriting wheeled a metal fan to the front room to dry documents. A transistor radio sputtered, caught a station, and let a high-life guitar drift down the hall. Laughter from the charge room rose and fell. The cell was left with the steady sermon of rain. Do they know how he died? Osandu asked, staring at the ceiling. Not yet, Kelechi said. They're waiting for the town doctor. Doctors write on bodies, Madhu murmured. Villagers write on faces. What do you mean? Chijioke asked. They have written killer on yours, Madhu said. Even if the doctor writes something else, faces are harder to erase. Silence settled. Somewhere, A generator gunned itself awake and then died again, like a fish gulping on sand. After lights out, the corridor held voices in pockets. A constable told another about his child's school fees. A woman cried softly in the front room and then stopped. The station cat padded past the cell and vanished into shadow. "Tell us," Kalechi said into the dark. "What did you do to them?" "Nothing," Chijioke answered. "I bought Gary. I boiled water for my mother. I prayed when I heard the scream. That is all." "People don't like simple answers," Madhu said. "They sound like lies." Osanda shifted on the floor. "I will be released tomorrow," he said, almost to himself. "My uncle will come with small money. He always comes." No one argued with the hope. It was the only clean thing in the room. Chijioke lay awake, eyes open to the dark, and repeated his own small prayer until it became a rhythm that matched the rain. "Lord, hold me. Hold her. Hold the truth steady." Morning entered through the barred window as a thin, yellow slice. The rain had washed the heat from the air. The corridor smelled of wet dust and old soap. The sergeant unlocked the door and nodded at Chijioke. "Up." He stood, ankles tingling from a night on cement. They led him back to the statement desk. "The body is at the town mortuary," the sergeant said. "The doctor will examine. We need your answers again for clarity. The same questions." He gave the same answers. They felt heavier, not different. A constable pinned a passport-size photo to a form with a rusty clip. It wasn't a good one. Shadows had sunk his eyes, but it would travel farther than his voice. When they were done, the sergeant closed the ledger with 2 palms. "You will remain here while we wait." "How long?" Chijioke asked. "As long as it takes the road to do what the road will do," the sergeant said, which meant nobody knows. By midday, the peephole opened again. "Your mother," the constable said to the cell. "She came. We sent her home. No visitors today." "Did she look well?" Chijioke asked. The constable blinked like a man who had used up his softer words already. "She looked like a mother," he said, and shut the hatch. Chijioke sat back against the wall. He pictured her climbing the hill, stopping twice to catch air, whispering the kind of prayer that makes no sound. He pressed his fists to his knees until the ache moved from inside to outside. Madhu nudged the cooler toward him. "Finish the beans." She would want that. He did. Toward evening, the station stirred with a new energy. The sergeant took a phone call and nodded too many times. A senior officer walked in with city polish on his speech. "Who is the suspect in the Yumudite case?" he asked, not because he didn't know, but because the room needed to hear him ask. "Here," the constable said, pointing. The senior officer looked at the statement file, then at Chijioke, then at the file again. "The court in Enugu wants to see this. We'll move him in the morning." "Sir," the sergeant said, "the villagers." "The villagers can speak in Enugu if they want," the man replied. "Bring any witness who loves their own voice." He left a ripple behind him that didn't settle for minutes. That night, the cell exhaled. Moves were news. News meant time was moving again. "Enugu," Kalechi said softly. "Bigger walls. Maybe better pens. Better doctors," Osandu added. "My uncle took my cousin there once." He came back smiling. Madhu scratched his name on the wall with a bottle cap until it showed white against gray. "Courts are clocks," he said. "They tell you what time it is in the land, not in your heart." They woke him before the rooster remembered his job. The air still held the last cool of night. The senior officer signed 2 papers. The sergeant stamped them as if trying to drive the ink through the page. "Hands," the constable said. "Rope again. Not as tight this time." Maybe the day itself was kinder. At the veranda, a few villagers pretended they had come to buy kerosene this early. Eyes did what mouths didn't. Someone's chin dipped toward the ground. A greeting or a curse. In a village, the line is thin. A pickup truck waited by the gate, paint sunburned to a dull red. The back was caged with bars. A driver in a faded cap yawned and turned the key. The engine answered with a cough and then a tired growl. They helped him climb in. The door slammed. Metal echoed. "Where are they taking him?" A woman asked no one and everyone. "Enugu," someone answered. "Where paper talks louder than people." The truck rolled out. The station shrank behind him. Then the mango tree. Then the broken culvert that always waited for rain to do its worst. The road opened, red, ribboned with puddles, bordered by cassava and laughter and suspicion. Children waved without knowing why. A goat looked personally offended. Chijioke kept his eyes on the horizon where the sky sat on the land like a promise. He did not let himself look left toward the path to his house. Looking is a kind of reaching, and reaching hurts. He breathed in dust and mourning and the iron smell of the cage. He breathed out something lighter than last night. They passed a signboard for a roadside clinic. A nurse in a lemon-green uniform stood outside, hands on hips, surveying the day. He thought of a different nurse with a church badge who wrote a time in a book with careful letters. Somewhere, paper was waiting to meet paper. Madu's words came back. Faces are harder to erase than files. True, but files could knock on doors that faces could not. The truck hit a smooth patch, then rough again. A hawk rode a warm current high above. The sun lifted itself over the line of trees and laid a hand on the road. Enugu waited with bigger buildings, different eyes, and a room where men in robes said what things were called. He had no control over any of that, but he had control over the next breath. The drive to Enugu ended in a yard surrounded by tall walls. Faded blue paint peeled from the signboard, Central Police Division. The truck jolted to a stop, and the officer in front shouted, "Move them." They unlocked the cage, pushed the suspects out one by one. Chijioke stepped down last. His legs ached from hours of rattling on the uneven road, but his mind ached more. He had left Yumudike behind. The village was familiar. This city was foreign. The compound smelled of dust, diesel, and something sour. Officers lounged on benches, chewing groundnuts, eyes heavy with boredom. They did not look at him like a man. They looked at him like paperwork. Cell 4. The sergeant barked. The iron door groaned open. Inside was a room wider than the one in Yumudike, but darker, with barred windows high on the wall. 6 men turned their heads as he entered. Their faces told stories before their mouths did. Scars, sunken cheeks, eyes that had stopped expecting tomorrow. The door clanged shut. For a while, no one spoke. New arrivals had to settle like dust before questions came. Chijioke sank into a corner, the cement floor cool under his palms. At last, a tall man broke the silence. "You look fresh." "First time." "Yes," Chijioke said softly. The man nodded. "Ifani, spare parts dealer. They say my goods were fake." They were not. Another voice rose from the shadows, deep, deliberate. "Yakubu, mechanic. They said I stole a car that is still parked in the owner's house." Laughter rippled, bitter but real. A third man, thin as a broomstick, lifted his head. "They said I poisoned my neighbor's well. The water was rusty. That is all." Finally, a younger boy, no more than 17, whispered, "They said I took bread from a kiosk. I did not. But who listens to a boy?" The circle of stories closed, waiting for his. "They said I took an old man's breath," Chijioke said quietly. The room stirred. Eyebrows rose. One man spat. "Breath? That is the easiest crime to invent. How do you prove you didn't?" No one had an answer. Days settled into rhythm. Morning meant thin pap and rusty tins. Afternoon meant the hum of officers outside, the shuffle of suspects being marched to interrogation. Evening meant heat pressing against the walls until sweat turned the cement floor slick. Inside the cell, men killed time with stories. Some bragged of women they loved, others of land they once farmed. But when night came, their voices softened. They spoke of families who stopped visiting, children growing up without them. Names turned sour outside. Chijioke listened more than he spoke. Sometimes he hummed hymns under his breath. The others did not complain. Even sorrow needed music. One afternoon, the constable on duty brought a transistor radio and set it on his desk in the corridor. At first, it was football commentary, men shouting about goals, prisoners groaning at missed chances they could not see. But after the match, the program changed. A strong voice filled the air. "This is Truth Hour. Tonight, we discuss wrongful detention. Too many Nigerians rot in cells without evidence. If you or someone you know has been falsely accused, call us now." The prisoners pressed against the bars, straining to hear. A caller from Nsukka said, "My brother has been locked up 8 months for stealing a motorcycle." No motorcycle was missing. Another caller, from Abakaliki. "They said I killed a neighbor, but it was typhoid that killed him. Still, they dragged me." The cell fell silent. Each man heard his own story in someone else's voice. Then came a caller from Yumudike. The line crackled, but the words were clear. "There is a boy in our village, Chijioke Yuba. They say he killed our elder by taking his breath. But it's not true. The man had asthma. We all knew." They just wanted someone to carry the blame. Chijioke's chest tightened. His name hung in the air, spoken for the first time beyond the village. The other prisoners turned to him, wide-eyed. "That's you," Ifani whispered. "Yes," he said, barely breathing. The host responded firmly. "This is serious. We will follow up. If any lawyer is listening, note this case." The call ended, but hope remained. That night, the prisoners gathered around him as though his body now gave off light. "You see," Yakubu said, "your story is out. Someone spoke for you." "But who?" Chijioke whispered. "My mother cannot call. She does not even have a radio." "Maybe that woman, the shopkeeper," another suggested. "Or maybe God himself," the young boy said softly. They laughed a little, not because it was funny, but because hope needed laughter to grow. For the first time in weeks, Chijioke slept with his shoulders lighter. Miles away, in Enugu City, Barrister Obinna sat at his desk. His radio played the same program. When he heard the name Chijioke Yuba, he leaned forward, pen scratching across a notepad. "Accused of killing by breath? Absurd," he muttered. If the boy had power to take breath, would he be farming cassava? By morning, he had made calls to a journalist friend, and the story began to grow legs. Files were requested. Names were checked. The slow wheels of help were turning. 2 days later, Chijioke was called out for visitors. His legs trembled as he walked to the small hall. Behind the bars, his mother stood, thinner, but her eyes fierce. Beside her was Nkechi, the shopkeeper, baby strapped to her back. "My son," Mama Aloka said, gripping the bars. "They're talking about you on the radio. The world will hear. God is not asleep." He blinked fast, holding back tears. "Mama, who called?" She shook her head. "Not me. Maybe Nkechi. Maybe another. But someone carried your truth." Nkechi nodded firmly. "I will not keep quiet. I told them, you only came for Gary. Let them laugh. I will keep talking." The constable tapped his baton. "Time." As they left, Mama Aloka pressed her hand to her chest and whispered, "Breathe, my son. Breathe." Back in the cell, Chijioke lay on the floor, watching the barred square of sky. Stars blinked like restless eyes. He whispered, "Lord, if this is your way of opening doors, let me have strength to walk through." The drip of water from a leaking pipe kept rhythm with his prayer. For the first time since his arrest, he did not feel forgotten. Somewhere outside, strangers were speaking his name, not as a curse, but as a call for justice. And names, once spoken aloud, could not be buried again. The Enugu High Court stood like a tired giant, its pillars streaked with dust, its windows cracked but proud. People gathered on the steps long before the case was called. Some wore suits shiny from overuse. Others came in village wrappers. But all came with one hunger, to watch justice, or gossip, or both. Inside, the air smelled of paper and sweat. Wooden benches creaked under the weight of villagers from Umudike who had traveled to witness the hearing. Some held their chins high, ready to whisper, "I told you." Others folded arms, waiting for the court to shame them for their doubt. At the front, a judge sat robed and stern. His spectacles perched low on his nose, his gavel resting on a desk scarred by years of verdicts. The clerk banged. "Case of the state versus Chijioke Yuba." The state prosecutor rose, lean as a stick, voice sharp like machete against bamboo. "My lord, the evidence is simple. The deceased, Elder Matsi Okafor, was last seen alive near his compound. Soon after, the accused was spotted loitering by the fence. The elder was found dead. This young man has no explanation." Murmurs rippled. Heads nodded. Truth and rumor danced together, inseparable. The prosecutor's eyes narrowed at Chijioke, who stood in the dock, wrists trembling but head upright. "My lord, villagers testified to his suspicious behavior. He mutters prayers in the bush. He avoids gatherings. He is not like others. Should we ignore such signs?" A voice hissed from the gallery. "Amen to that." Laughter followed, quickly hushed by the clerk's gavel. Then Barrister Obinna rose. His suit was plain, his briefcase older than some policemen, but his voice carried strength. "My lord, suspicion is not evidence. This young man has been chained by whispers, not facts. Today, we will let science, not superstition, speak." He held up a file. The autopsy report. The judge leaned forward. "Read." Obinna read slowly, each word heavy. No bruises on the neck. No marks of violence. Lungs constricted, airways blocked. Foam around the mouth. Findings consistent with acute asthma attack. Cause of death, respiratory failure. A wave of gasps swept the court. Asthma, people whispered. So not strangled? Not poison? The prosecutor stood quickly. But, my lord, who triggered the attack? Could not fear, caused by the accused, bring it on? Can we rule out spiritual means? The judge's eyebrows rose like hills. Counsel, this is a court of law, not a shrine. Keep your questions and evidence. Laughter broke out again, louder this time. The prosecutor sat, face red. Your Honor, Obina continued. I also bring an alibi. A woman in a blue nurse's uniform stepped forward, Nurse Amaka, from the church clinic. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore. On the night Elder Okafor died, I visited Mama Aloku, the accused mother. It was 9:15 p.m. I logged the time in my patient record. I saw Chijioke by the stove, boiling water for his mother's breathing. He was with her, not at the elder's house. She held up a small logbook. The judge examined it, nodding. Exhibit A. Obina spread his hands. The dead man's own sickness killed him, and this logbook proves the accused was elsewhere. What remains but to free him? The gallery erupted. Some villagers shook their heads violently. Doctors can lie, one shouted. Logbooks can be forged, another spat. If asthma killed him, who sent the asthma? Someone hissed. Others looked down, ashamed. A few whispered, maybe we were wrong. But no one apologized. The judge struck his gavel. Silence. He cleared his throat, voice steady. This court finds no evidence linking the accused to the death of Elder Okafor. Medical findings prove natural cause. Witness testimony provides alibi. Therefore, I rule. Chijioke Yuba is innocent. Release him. The gavel thundered. Mama Aloko burst into tears, her frail frame shaking as she lifted her hands to heaven. Nkechi hugged her tightly, whispering, It is finished. Chijioke stood stunned, as if the word innocent was too big to fit in his ears. Freedom should have felt like sunrise. Instead, it felt like standing in smoke. Outside, the crowd split in two. Some clapped his back. Others spat on the ground. Women pulled their children close. Men muttered, Court may free him, but God knows. Chijioke walked between them, his mother's hand gripping his arm. Each step was heavy with shame that no verdict could wash away. Back in the village, the whispers sharpened. Some greeted him coldly. Others refused to buy from his family. At the stream, women fetched water and shifted their buckets away when he arrived. Children turned breath thief into a game, chasing each other with shouts of accusation. One evening, sitting outside their hut, Chijioke told his mother, The court freed me, but the people have not. She touched his cheek with her frail hand. My son, freedom begins inside you. Do not let their tongues choke your breath again. My son, don't fear their eyes, she said softly. Truth is still breathing, even if whispers try to smother it. Days later, he followed his mother to the market. The air was alive with smells, fried akara, dried fish, palm oil. Traders shouted prices, children darted between stalls. But as soon as people noticed him, the energy changed. That is him, someone muttered. Don't let him touch your goods, another warned. At a stall selling palm oil, his mother reached for a bottle. The trader slapped her hand away. Madam, carry your money elsewhere. I don't sell to murderers' families. Mama Aloku's eyes filled, but she stood her ground. My son is innocent. The court said so. The trader spat. Courts don't wash hearts. Chijioke's chest burned. He wanted to shout, to curse, but he clenched his fists until his nails dug his palms. He carried the basket, silent, dignity his only weapon. A week later, he traveled to the nearby town to seek work at a construction site. The foreman, a stout man in dusty boots, eyed him up and down. You look strong, the man said. We need hands. Relief flickered, but then another worker leaned close, whispering. The foreman's face shifted. Sorry, no space, he said quickly. Chijioke pressed. But you just said, no space. The foreman barked, turning away. Behind him, the whisper floated. That's the one they said killed with breath. He walked off, the weight of rejection heavier than the basket he carried at the market. At night, lying on the raffia mat beside his mother, the whispers came back like echoes. Breath thief. Spirit killer. Court cannot wash his hands. He closed his eyes and prayed. Lord, give me peace. If not in their mouths, then at least in my chest. But even in sleep, The dreams were heavy, the elder's bare feet, the crowd's eyes, the cell's walls. Weeks later, the youth council gathered in the village hall. Elections were near. Names were being thrown around for leadership. A voice from the back called, "What about Chijioke? He is educated enough, and he has sense." The hall erupted. "Never," one man shouted. "Can a man once accused of killing lead us?" Another scoffed. "We cannot put shame on our heads," a third added. Chijioke stood slowly. His voice cut through the noise. "I did not come here to beg for position. But remember, any of you can be accused wrongly. And when that day comes, may you taste the medicine you gave me." Silence fell, sharp and sudden. He sat down again. He did not win, but his words stayed in the walls like smoke. One hot afternoon, a commotion erupted near the junction. A boy had been accused of stealing a phone. A crowd surrounded him, sticks raised. The boy knelt, trembling, insisting he hadn't taken it. "Beat him," someone shouted. "Thieves must learn." Chijioke pushed through. "Stop," he yelled. "Have you seen the phone in his hands? Did anyone catch him with it?" The crowd turned. Someone sneered. "See who is talking, the breath thief himself." "Yes." Chijioke shot back, chest rising. "They once called me that, but I was innocent. Do you want to kill another innocent child today?" His voice carried a weight that silenced the crowd. Slowly, sticks lowered. The butcher admitted he hadn't actually seen the boy steal. Grumbling, the crowd dispersed. The boy's mother ran forward, weeping, holding her son. That night, she came to Chijioke's hut, kneeling at his feet. "You saved my child. May God save you in return." For the first time since his trial, gratitude drowned out suspicion. Days later, Barrister Obinna arrived in Yumyadike. His small car coughed smoke, but his presence drew a crowd. He sat with Chijioke under the mango tree. "My boy," he said, "the law freed you, but society still chains you. The question is, what will you do with your pain?" Chijioke looked at the ground. "I can't run from it. Everywhere I go, their eyes follow me." Obinna leaned forward. "Pain can bury you, or it can plant you. Which will you choose?" The words struck deep. For the first time, Chijioke saw his suffering not only as a wound, but as a seed. As weeks passed, Mama Aloka's cough worsened. Her body grew frail, her steps slower. One evening, she called her son to her side as the sun bled red across the sky. "My son," she whispered, "I will not stay long in this world. But I am proud. They tried to bury you with lies, but you grew like yam in the ground. Promise me, don't stop fighting for truth." Tears filled his eyes. "I promise, Mama." She smiled faintly, eyes soft. "Then I can go in peace." That night, she slipped quietly into the other world. The next morning, the village gathered for her burial. Some came out of respect. Some came out of curiosity. Whispers still followed. She defended him till her death. Chijioke laid her body in the earth with trembling hands, whispering, "Mama, your fight will live through me." The harmattan came with dust that sat heavy in the air. Every morning, the sky was white with haze, and every evening, coughs echoed through the village like a chorus nobody wanted to hear. Children wheezed after chasing football in the square. Old men clutched their chests after farm work. Even young women sat on verandas fanning themselves as if air could be pulled into their lungs. For many in Yumyadike, struggling for breath was as normal as hunger. But for Chijioke, every gasp he heard dragged him back, to the elder who died, to the cell walls, to his mother's cough in the night. He could not ignore it. One afternoon, the voices for the wrongly accused group gathered under the mango tree. A widow told her story through tears. "My husband died because his asthma medicine finished. I begged the chemist to sell on credit. He refused. By morning, my husband was gone." The group sat in heavy silence. Chijioke stood slowly. "My friends, they once called me a thief of breath. But I will spend the rest of my life giving breath back. We must build a place here, a clinic where people with asthma and chest sickness can be treated. Not just the rich, but everyone." Some scoffed. "You? Build a clinic? Where will you find money?" But his voice did not waver. "We will start small, brick by brick, hope by hope." The next weeks turned into a mission. He walked from compound to compound, asking for help. Some gave coins. Some gave firewood. One carpenter donated old zinc sheets. Even those who still whispered against him found themselves handing something, if only to silence their own guilt. Barrister Obinna called contacts in Enugu. A charity agreed to send inhalers and basic medicines. Nurses from town promised to volunteer once the building was ready. Slowly, what had been a dream began to look like walls. Men dug foundations while women carried water in basins balanced on their heads. Youths carried blocks, joking between sweat. A painter from the next village wrote the name on a rough signboard. Chijioke Breath Center. In memory of Elder Matsi Okafor and Mama Aloku. When the board was nailed to a post, silence fell. Some wiped their eyes secretly. For the first time, the elder's death and his mother's pain had turned into something that could heal. The day of the opening, villagers gathered again, but this time, not to accuse. A church choir sang. Women ululated. The Agui himself cut the ribbon, clearing his throat before speaking. Once we judged wrongly. Today, we stand corrected. May this place bring life. Chijioke stood by, fighting back tears. His heart carried both grief and triumph. By noon, the benches were full. A boy no older than 10 sat clutching his chest, his breath whistling. An old woman came, saying she had not slept in years without waking to cough. A farmer arrived, lungs scarred from burning bushes. They received treatment free of charge. For the first time, the insult breath thief began to fade. In whispers, people now called him something new, breath giver. Weeks later, a journalist from Enugu wrote an article, From Accused to Advocate, how a wrongly jailed farmer built a clinic of hope. The story spread. Letters came from nearby villages asking for advice. Volunteers arrived with medicine. Students from town offered to help on weekends. One afternoon, a stranger came, a young man in city clothes. He introduced himself as the grandson of Matsi Okafor. He clasped Chijioke's hands. My grandfather's death caused you pain, he said softly. But today, you honor him more than any of us. Thank you. Chijioke swallowed hard. For the first time, the elder's memory felt like peace, not burden. The breath center grew. Another room was added, then a small store for medicine. The voices for the wrongly accused meetings doubled in size. People traveled from other towns to share their stories. Some cases were taken to court with Obina's help. Chijioke never forgot the nights in the cell, the rejection in the market, the way his mother coughed until her breath stopped. But he turned each scar into strength, each insult into fuel. One evening, as the sun melted red behind the palm trees, Chijioke stood in front of the clinic. Children played nearby, their laughter rising like a song. Inside, nurses bustled, checking patients, handing out medicine. He closed his eyes, let the breeze touch his face, and whispered, They once said I stole breath. Now I give it back. This is my answer. He inhaled deeply, filling his chest with clean evening air. For the first time in years, it did not feel borrowed. It felt free. And in that moment, the boy once called breath thief became the man remembered as breath giver.